educator. I bet you couldn't tell. But what I don't love hearing is, oh, I love music, but I absolutely hated my music class because my teacher made me hate it. This is something that absolutely breaks my heart because music, just like any other subject, is fundamental to students' overall development. When a teacher fails, intentionally or not, to provide a safe learning environment, students feel defeated, and it will change the way they view that subject and education for the rest of their lives. I've been a student of music since the age of 4, and I was lucky enough to have had the encouragement and instruction of some incredible educators to get me where I am today. However, not all of my teachers were as amazing as the ones in my early years. I was always a pretty good student, and I was raised by a former educator, so I grew up knowing and appreciating the importance and value of education. When I got into college, I knew I would have to take that to heart and work harder than I ever had before. Unfortunately, in my first semester, I had a professor who was very discouraging and told me that because I wasn't excelling on one instrument, that wasn't my primary instrument, mind you, that I, quote, would never be an educator, and if I was, I wouldn't be a successful one. This tore me down. Had he given me some positive feedback, or feedback in general, on how to fix my techniques, how to correct my problems, something, I may have worked a little bit harder that year. But because of that one comment, I gave up. Due to this, many of my other professors brushed me aside and didn't give me the time and support that I really needed. If it wasn't for another professor, Dr. Linda Pickney, telling me that my worth was not determined by this one class and this one professor, I don't think I would have continued with music. She took the time to help me. She worked with me one-on-one. She gave me feedback, and she put me in my place when I wasn't making the best choices. She helped me become the musician and educator that I am today. To this day, I want to give all of my students the kind of support and encouragement that Dr. Pickney gave to me. I never wanted them leaving my room feeling defeated like that awful professor did to me. I wanted to build them up. So when I finally did get my own classroom, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. All I could think was, am I gonna struggle the way that this professor said I would? But I wouldn't let it get to me. I went in there and I treated every student the way that Dr. Pickney treated me, with love, support, and encouragement. So how do I do this? How do we do this as educators? One of the greatest obstacles we as teachers have to face and grapple with is time. So I had to develop a way to create more time in my classes to give my students the attention that they needed. Because of this constant constraint of large class sizes and time, many teachers, myself included in my early years, focus on a whole class lesson and assessment to get through their content. But far too often, this leads to teachers spending less and less time with students individually. I approach this by intentionally designing lessons that minimize whole class instruction and maximize opportunity for one-on-one and small group instruction. By doing this, I've been able to create a method of teaching that is tailored to each student's needs based on their own background knowledge and skills. Let me give you an example. A few years back, I had a student who joined one of my music theory classes because he liked music and wanted to understand how it works. Now, if you've ever taken a music theory class or even looked at a music theory textbook, you know it is not for the faint of heart. But I didn't discourage him, and I told him that he would get a lot out of the class. Unfortunately, he did not understand a single thing from day one, immediately gave up, and tried to sleep in the corner. From what I gathered when talking to his other teachers, he was like this in pretty much every other class. So I knew I was going to have to try something different with him. So one day, during our individual work time, I went and sat with him, and I just simply asked, "Why don't you want to do the work?" His response was pretty typical for a student in this mindset. "I just don't get it, and I just don't like music." For him, he didn't understand the order and placement of notes on the staff based on their clef, and my explanations and acronyms to remember them were stupid. So, at this point, I could have gotten frustrated and do what a lot of teachers do. Blame the student, double down on my methods, and/or contact the parents and tell them that their student is refusing to participate in my class. Instead, I sat with him And we came up with a set of words and phrases and acronyms that would work for him so that he would remember it successfully. By giving him this little act of guiding his own lesson and giving him some one-on-one attention that he really needed, he not only got the concept, but it became our own secret language. And he later shared with me that he now uses these skills and techniques in his Spanish class for remembering verb conjugations and in his math class for memorizing formulas. This is just one example as to how you can help a student who just doesn't care rather than giving up on them. I have seen some incredible, inspiring educators give up on a student because no matter what they do, that student just won't try. I have been there many, many, many times myself. However, every time I get to that point, I think about the way that that professor in college treated me and how deflated I was, and it renews my spirit to start again. In my first year of teaching, I constantly worried that maybe I wasn't a good teacher because I wasn't doing things the right way, which in my mind was the way that every other teacher was doing it. But when my students nominated me for a Music Educator Grammy Award within my first year of teaching, all because they developed a love of music from my instruction, I knew I was doing something right. There is no one right way to teach all students, and it is so important to give students the individualized time that they need, especially when they're not responding or being successful with conventional methods. I'm now learning that so many of my students have taken the skills from that one-on-one instruction and applied it to places outside the music classroom because they come back and share it with me. I've even gotten to hear how they've applied it in their real lives after school. Recently, I had the honor and privilege of playing violin for a former student's wedding and was sitting at a table with her brother, whom I also taught. We were talking and he said to me, "I know I had a really hard time in your class, but this time you spent with us working on proper breathing techniques for singing has helped me so much in my cross-country career. I use these skills every single time I run, and I don't think I would have been as successful if it wasn't for your encouragement." Another student at that same wedding pulled me aside and said, "I know I had a horrible time trying to memorize things in your class, but I've been using your make it a song technique that you taught me for memorizing rhythmic values, and I've applied it to my college math class. I can now break down problems with such ease because all of my formulas are now songs. I haven't forgot a single one." And then she proceeded to sing one to me. These students felt like I contributed to their success because I took the time to individualize their learning in a way that other teachers hadn't. If we want it's our job as educators to provide them with an experience that empowers them. This can be done by intentionally designing lessons that maximize opportunity for one-on-one and small group instruction within the classroom. Spending time with students in an individualized setting within your classroom allows us to create a method of teaching that is tailored to each student's needs. Far too often, students enter our rooms already defeated because other teachers have taught them that they're not up to standards. We must never, ever, ever give up on our students, no matter how hard it gets. Most importantly, we need to stop approaching our most difficult students as if they are the problem and start challenging ourselves to take a look at the way that we have been teaching them might be the problem. If we want to mold the future in a positive way, it's our job to ensure that we keep moving our students forward and never giving up on their future. Our job as educators is to teach, not defeat. Thank you.